Hi, I'm Kate Danley and welcome to the Kate Cast. Okay, so my guest today is Caroline Treadwell. She's this amazing actress. She's trained at Carnegie Mellon, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, and performed with the Moscow Art Theatre. In addition, she went to school in Vietnam. She's out in Africa working with babies who have AIDS. She's a remarkable woman. Sit back, relax, and meet Caroline Treadwell.
Who am I gonna talk to today? What will I ask them and what will they say? What will they say? What will they say?
Hi, I am Kate Danley. Welcome to the Kate Cast. I am here with actor and writer Caroline Treadwell. Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
When did you first become interested in acting?
I was really young, and I think was pretty lucky that I grew up in New York City, and my parents loved the theater. Like, my dad has had a very interesting career that really hasn't had anything to do with set design, but that was what he wanted to do when he was little, so he's always loved the theater. And my mom loves it, and so they really made an effort to take me, which is not the case, I think, for a lot of people, especially today. Yeah. And I really fell in love with just being in the room, you know, that like, I imagine, because I am not religious, I imagine that people who are religious walk into a church and they have this feeling of like, this is different from everywhere else. And that happened to me with theater. Like, very early on, I remember being very, almost like a sacred experience of being in the dark room and then having this magical thing happen. And I could not see as a kid, and I didn't know it. You know, it's like you don't realize that you're blind until someone gives you glasses and you're like, oh my god, that's the world? Because I kind of thought it was just a big blur. And I was 12 when I got glasses, so like up until 12, I thought you just went in and you couldn't see anything that was going on up there. Just like these vague forms kind of moving, but you could hear it and you could experience it. And so what I felt was this real energy coming from the performers, like, to me. Wow. And, you know, it was before mics. Okay. So I don't know if it was actually their voices were kind of like traveling to me and affecting me, but I really was moved, and more than moved, I was really like immersed in this other kind of world when I went to the theater, and kind of spoiled me for today's age, because I don't have that feeling with movies or TV or anything where it's not, or recorded music. Yeah. Like, I like live stuff because I like that feeling of being like immersed in the actual physical waves coming at me.
What's the first show you remember seeing and having that experience?
I don't even remember, because there were so many, because my parents were just great about it, and my mom was the president of a theater board for a while, so we went to a lot of stuff. And I know, when I was a kid, I worked at a theater too. When I was a little kid, it was, and I still work at the theater now as an actor. And I'm actually on the board of that theater that I was like a kid usher at. But I would usher, and I was like, you know, probably like 8, and we would show people to their seats, and then I would watch the show. And I memorized a bunch of plays because I just loved them. And I just remember sitting there and like watching it and sort of saying the lines along with the actors. And I was so lucky to have that. I mean, for me, because I think it definitely put me on the course of being an actor. And it's kind of funny to come full circle then around to being like on the board of the theater that I like got introduced to really like that life. But I also remember being like in the school plays. And I remember this one experience in particular, and I must have been like 11. And I just was on stage with this person. I just remember this feeling. It was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a physical sensation of total engagement. Yeah. Like, I was there for that moment. Everything in me was focused on her, and having this feeling of being like, zhunk, right now. And it has stayed with me now. I can still feel that. Yeah. And I think part of the reason that I went into acting was to kind of have that happen again. And it has, but not a lot. Like, unfortunately, most of my acting is, what's my next line? Where am I going right now? Oh my god, there's an audience. There's a camera right there. So, you know, it's been a struggle for me to reclaim that. But I have had moments, and I can remember them. I can remember the moments when everything kind of came together on stage, and it was a total relaxation. It was like just being in the flow of it. And I wish I knew how to just be in that state all the time. But it just happens, unfortunately, by chance, I guess, for me.
Now, you mentioned your dad wanted to go into set design, but were your parents involved in the art?
No, I mean, my mom is a writer,
Okay.
and my dad was a writer too, actually, for a long time, but he's had a few careers. He was a politician, and they both started out as sports writers, and they met, actually, in the football desk at Sports Illustrated, so they met through writing, but the theater thing was just, I think my dad's always just loved the theater, and my mom loved it too. I mean, she's always been extremely involved, but they're not actors.
Okay.
You know, and as far as I know, there haven't been any actors in my family. There have been some dramatic personalities, but no actual legitimate actors.
Did you do theater in high school?
Yeah, I've done theater forever, I think. I feel like there was no... I remember in college kind of having this crisis because everyone around me seemed very focused and they knew what they wanted to do and they were already... They could see their life after college and they were using college as a way to transition into that, and that was just beyond me. I was like, I don't know how... I can't see tomorrow. I can't see like this evening, like what's going on. And I had no... I knew I loved acting, but I also thought, you can't do that. Like, that's not a career. That's not something I can, you know... I went to school in North Carolina. Like, I'm in North Carolina. I'm not like... Well, I'm not walking down the street in Hollywood and they're like, you're you know, in you know, whatever, like the Lana Turner thing or whatever, where she's like drinking a soda at the diner and they're like, you know, I mean, that wasn't part of my world. So I didn't know the steps to being an actor.
Right.
So I remember walking home and I looked in the newspaper and I was like, I have to do something. And I opened up the school paper and I was like, I'm going to find something in here just to like focus me. Because that's what I'm doing. And there were two things, and one of them was flying lessons. And they were not expensive. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a pilot. And I turned the page and it was like drama auditions. And I was like, I love acting. And I just didn't think I should be doing it because I wasn't in high school anymore. So I was like, I'm going to audition for the play. And I'm going to take flying lessons. And I'm going to see which wins out. Like, I'm either going to be a pilot at the end of this or I'm going to be an actor. So it was really looking like I should be a pilot. Except that I can't land. And you know, you need that. You need that skill. And like the normal course for the pilots, and I loved it. It was great. I would get in this rickety old thing, and I really felt like I was kind of a bush pilot, like outside of the world up there in that plane, and I had the instructor guy who was awesome and incredibly patient and totally daredevil, because he got up there with me. You know, it was this cool thing. You could kind of join the flying club, and then basically all you had to do was pay for gas and the instructor, but the plane was free. And the flying club was not expensive. Like, it was the world's greatest way to get your pilot's license. So I'm like, this is my path, man. I couldn't drive a car, by the way. I learned how to fly, but I could not drive. But I was like, this is so much better than a road, because it's the whole sky. Like, you don't have to stick to your lane and, like, follow the rules. Like, this is your... I was so small that, like, you know, the big jets were all the way up there, and so we didn't deal with them. We were, like, in our own airspace. Me and maybe one other plane that I encountered ever, which was panicking. I was like, there's a plane over there. You know, that was really fun, and it really felt like my own world, and I loved that. But then it came time to go home again, you know? And it's like, all of a sudden, all this limitlessness, it became very specific. Like, you can't just land anywhere. You gotta hit that tiny, tiny strip, which, by the way, had a lot of trees, like, right at the edge of it, and, like, the planes come right in over the trees, and I thought, we're going to die today, right now. And so my instructor would have to land the plane, basically every time. I would land occasionally, and I would go bumping down the thing, and they'd be like, here comes the girl again. Like, so I never got my pilot's license. But I did do a lot of acting. And I thought, okay, well, now I have to do this path, because I can't do the pilot thing. And I really loved acting in college. It's wonderful. It's the perfect place. And I really loved the people that I met. And it was a great atmosphere of people at a time in their lives where they're kind of trying to figure out who they are and finding their identity and just sort of celebrating that identity, and that was very fun. And I remember I was so into it that, like, it was the day that my school was in the playoffs, and I went to the play, of course, because I'm not going to watch the basketball game on TV, like apparently the entire world was doing. And I went to the show, and the guy was the like usher guy or whatever, it was probably the director, was like, all right, that's the 5th person, we can do the play. And my friend afterwards, who I'd gone to see, was like, did you really have to come? Because I wanted to go home and watch that game. And I thought, what's wrong with these people? Like, they have the opportunity to be on stage performing, and they would rather be at home watching a game on TV. I didn't get the sports thing at all. I still don't get the sports thing. I'm a total dork because I don't get the sports thing. But so I feel like the theater was always always a theme in my life that was very stronger than any other, really. When I found myself chronically unemployed and I started writing.
Yeah.
It was the theater. I started writing for the theater and writing plays. The ability to write for the theater feels even more kind of humbling and right for me than to act in it, because I really feel like I owe the theater, you know, so much for the joy that it's brought me. And so here's something that I can give. Like, take this if you please take this. Please take this play. Please do this play. But that's been a really fun thing that I didn't expect to happen. Yeah. Like, I took a playwriting class in college, and I didn't know how to write plays, so I basically was writing like reality plays where I would just go home and listen to my roommates. So I would just kind of type on my old little Apple and print it out on my dot matrix printer. I love how I'm perpetually aging myself with every reference that I make. I would just like type what they were saying and print it out and hand it in. Like, it was the world's laziest playwriting, but it was basically like the reality play of my house. I considered that I was cheating, and I didn't think that I was really a playwright at all, because people were actually coming up with characters and plot and, you know, presenting that in my class, and I was just like going, you know, this is naturalism. So I never took myself seriously, like, and I didn't know that it was something that I liked or that I could do or that I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, when I was doing it, I had the same kind of feeling. The first time I gave a script, it wasn't even finished. I gave some scenes to some friends to read just so I could hear it, because I didn't know what I was doing. And when they started saying the words, it was like the most amazing feeling. It was just this like, whoa, because it wasn't in my head. It was actually there. It was out there. Right. And that was cool. Yeah. I thought.
What did you do after college?
I was lost for a little while. It took me a long time to graduate from college. Between dropping out and then I studied abroad in Vietnam.
What did you do in Vietnam?
I just did like a semester abroad, but it was kind of interesting because I went to the study abroad office a lot. It was kind of my social life, I'm embarrassed to say. But I was like, oh my God, look at all these opportunities. Like, I can go, you know, to South Africa and all this stuff that just was like, I never thought I'd be able to do that. You know? I applied to a bunch of programs and they were all full. Okay. So I ended up in Vietnam by accident, because I was sort of going down the list of like interesting places that I didn't know anything about that would maybe be cool. And when I got to Vietnam, they were like, yeah, we have openings here, so we'll take you. And I was having a hard time too with my college, because there were really some deep-seated issues about racism that I didn't expect. And my school was apparently the liberal, you know, center of my state, and the state that I was going to college in, and it was disturbing to me. I mean, I came from this sort of bubble of New York City, and I didn't expect that. I mean, that wasn't true in the theater department, you know, it wasn't true in my academic department. But I noticed socially that it was weird. It was like the campus was almost kind of split, and like, you know, white students liked to live on this side and black students liked to live on this side, and I was like, what is this? You know, this isn't the world. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And it was very disturbing to me, and I didn't really know how to handle it. And so I was like, I gotta get out of here. So I'm gonna go to South Africa, because, you know, South Africa knows about this, and they, like, I'm gonna figure out what they're doing to like, fix their major problem with racism. I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna be like, you know, solving this crisis. And there was this really wonderful guy running against Jesse Helms at the time, and a really, really, really wonderful candidate. And I was like, oh, this guy's going to win, and he's amazing. His name's Harvey Gant. And I was like, he came to campaign on campus, and his daughter was a student of the school, and I met her, and I was like, she's awesome, this is great. And then he got completely crushed. And I was like, I don't understand it. And I heard students talking about it, and they were like, well, we're not going to let that black guy into the Senate, you know? And I was like, is that really the way people feel? Like, it was an eye-opener for me. And, you know, I'm certainly, you know, not, like, I mean, it feels very obnoxious to be like, well, you know, I'm not, you know, I come from like a totally open-minded, you know, world or whatever, because I'm sure that's not true, but like my perceptions were very altered by this. And so I decided to go to Vietnam, and but I went and I did all this research on it, because that was like my experience of the world. Is like, I'm going to read a lot of books about Vietnam, and I'm going to understand Vietnam. So I read 25 books. So, and I had this cassette, which was so ridiculous. Again, in my Walkman, in my cassette, and I was listening to all you could get was like Vietnamese for travelers.
Okay.
So, or for businessmen, that's
Okay.
what it was, for businessmen. So I learned phrases like, would your wife like to join us for cocktails after golf? I mean, it was ridiculous. And so I'm like studying this. I'm like, would your wife like, and so I was very unprepared for Vietnam. Basically, this is a very long way of saying that I was totally unprepared for Vietnam. And we still had an embargo on Vietnam at the time. And so I went, you know, you had to go through Thailand, and it was this whole like complicated thing to get your visa. And then you got there, and I was supposed to go to Saigon, but at the last minute, the like administrator called, and he was like, the government took our program away. There's no program. You can't go. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have to go back to the school? And I was just like, I'm getting out. And he said, if you want, you can go to Hanoi. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to Hanoi. Even better. Even like more interesting. There was like one street light, you know, and everybody was on bikes, and it was great, and motor mopeds or whatever. It was really fun. And I just loved it. It was great. Most of the time I was just kind of exploring and like trying to learn Vietnamese and about Vietnam, and that was a very cool thing, and it was a fascinating time. There was like the older generation that was very Frenchified, and they would kind of, these, you know, old men on bicycles with like French bread steaming in the basket and like berets, and I was like, this is fascinating. It's not what I expected. And then you know, then there were the younger people that spoke English, and they were, you know, wanting to really change the city and bring in cars. And I'm like, cars are not going to fit on these streets. Yeah. But they're there now. I mean, they fit the cars. I don't know how. I don't know. There were like, I saw like 2 cars the whole time I was there. And both the times it was like, they were going at the pace of bikes down the road, you know. It didn't seem conducive to automobiles. And that was great, you know. I didn't drive, first of all, but also, like, bikes are so much more fun. You know? Can you imagine if there were no cars out there? We were just all on bikes. I mean, we'd never go to Santa Monica, probably, but it was pretty cool. And the Vietnamese people were really amazing to me, because I had been scared, because I was living on a street that was heavily bombed. Okay. In fact, it was kind of famous. This Bach Mai hospital, which I had read about, was bombed. You know, totally wrong by any, like, ethics of warfare. And there I was, an American living on Bach Mai Street, and I was like, this isn't going to go over well, so I pretended to be Australian for a really long time. A really long time. And finally, I was like, you know what? I need to just come out as an American, because I want to know, you know, people are starting to get to know me. Right. They don't hate me. Maybe this is a good thing. So I told everyone I was American. And, oh my God, it was unbelievable.
What happened?
Everybody suddenly was like, oh, an American. And they took me everywhere. They were like, meet this. And like they, I mean, it was way over the top, because I was an ignorant college student. But they were like, I mean, I remember I was in a village, and they had a ceremony, like, welcoming the American. I was the, you know, outsider that was like coming to Vietnam because I was interested in it, and because I was like the ambassador of peace, and I was the Statue of Liberty, as they called me. And like this man like did this kind of a recorder type instrument, like created this musical piece for me, and someone read a poem about like I'm the Statue of Liberty, and I'm going, I am an idiot American student. Like, I'm really not deserving of this. And all I can say is please and thank you. And I really can't even say that, because in Vietnamese it's very specific about when you say please and thank you with like an ending depending on the people's gender and age. And I came from America, so I was just like guessing down, because I didn't want to offend people by thinking they were maybe older than they were. And it was the world's biggest insult, because in Vietnam, age was revered, and you like earned your title of grandma or grandpa. And like if I called you aunt or uncle, that was like really offensive. So I just went around offending everyone. So I was afraid to say thank you or anything. So I said nothing. I couldn't say hello. I couldn't say thank you. I just said nothing. But the people were so welcoming. There was no animosity. Wow. And I remember I ended up moving in with a family in Hanoi who was just the most wonderful family. And I was like, I have to ask, you know, when I was in America and I told people I was going to Vietnam, I was met with a lot of resistance. Like people said, you know, I've lost family there and I don't understand. Like there was a very much a negative feeling and a kind of a negative feeling about Vietnam. I mean, because we had lost and it was this wound and, you know, like Vietnam was bad. Mm-hmm. And when I got here, it's the opposite. And I mean, just down the street, that hospital was like, you know, that was bad. And he's like, well, you know, because first of all, I think it's different for people in Vietnam because we've been at war forever. It's like, you know, we fought before the Americans, we fought the French, and then we fought the Cambodians. Like, we went straight into this. And before that, we were fighting China for 2,000 years or something. So he's like, you know, it's a different attitude. Like, we never blamed the American people, ever. You know, it was the government made this decision, and we understood why, and we didn't, you know, we didn't want it. But it was such a kind of a mature, larger, you know, scope, worldview, and that was really changing for me to see the larger perspective.
So you arrived back in America, and then you graduated from school, and so what did you do after that?
Sorry. Okay, so after school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't know how to do that. And there's plenty of ways to figure that out, but I was not resourceful, and I was like, I don't get it. What am I supposed to do? But all I could think of was like, I need to go to school to learn how to be an actor. Yeah. I ended up applying to grad schools in acting and getting rejected everywhere. And going, oh my God, this is so depressing. I'll never be an actor. And then I was kind of taking classes in New York, and I found it very hard to be a New York actor. There was a lot of stuff that you had to do that was, I really admire everybody who does it. Like, part of it was, you know, you had to, because you weren't in the union yet, you had to get up and like wait on that line in front of the equity building for all the equity people to go, and then maybe you'd get seen or something. Like, really, I mean, it was hard enough for the equity people. You know, you had to get up really early to get to the front of those lines, and I had friends who did it with their little folding chair and their coffee, and they would just sit down with a book in the winter at 6 a.m. outside, you know, in New York City, and they got their auditions, and bless them, they have like careers now. But I was like, I'm gonna get there at 11 and see how it goes type of person, and it didn't go well. Like, I never got auditions. So that I didn't really have what it took in New York, and I can't sing and I can't dance, and a lot of it was musical stuff. This is terrible.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna try for school again, and it was a couple of years of trying for school before I did get accepted, and I loved my program. I really loved it. And that was wonderful.
Where did you go?
I went to, it was a very brief window of a program that was a joint program between Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh and the Moscow Art Theater School in Russia. Wow. It was amazing. And we got to spend a semester in Moscow performing at the Moscow Art Theater. So that was cool.
What was Moscow like?
Oh, it was great. It was amazing. I mean, I was so in love with the life of, like, you know, my classes, and then we were performing in rep all the time, and people in Moscow go to the theater. Like, at least back in when I was there, that's what they did. And it was very cheap, because that's the real problem with it here. I think it's prohibitively expensive. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen really, really wonderful theater here that has been low budget, you know, but really brilliant, wonderful, moving, powerful stuff. But even low budget theater, they still have to charge like $20, 15 to 25, you know, for a seat. And, you know, that's a lot of money for people to be shelling out. And, you know, when they can watch TV for free. Right. So I feel like part of it is that it's just too expensive to do. And I wish there was a way around it, because I produce theater. It's expensive to produce. Yeah. You have to charge for it. You know, you have to charge a lot if you want a really expensive production, and that's upsetting to me, because what I experienced in Russia was very cheap theater, extremely well done. As a student, I got in free with my student ID, and it was, I mean, the nights that we didn't have shows, we went to the theater. My Russian was bad. But the thing that I discovered about the Russian actors is that you don't need to know Russian to know what they're doing, because they're so good. Like, their intentions are so clear that the language was, I'm sure, amazing, but I didn't even need it to be completely into it and moved. And the actors are so alive on stage and just brilliant. And I remember we were in a dorm with the Russian students, and one of my closest friend in the dorm was in the Moscow Art Theater. I went to see her play, and she was astonishing. And I was like, this is like my friend that I've been hanging out with. And she's, you know, Meryl Streep. Like, I had no idea. But they were all so good. I mean, and I felt like such an asshole, because here we were in our dorm, right? And we had, like, the American floor. So our program took up a floor of this dorm. And, you know, we were roughing it, because we had, like, just a hot plate kind of in the kitchen. We had, like, a microwave, I guess. And we had, like, a little stove top. All of us sharing, you know, a fridge. And we had a washer-dryer combo You know, what a pain in the ass that is. And like we had to go all the way to the end of the hall to take a shower, and there was only 2 showers and we all shared it, and like the cold water, you know, was always coming on. And so it was like sometimes your shower was really cold. Or like I think we didn't have hot water for a couple of months probably. That was yeah, I think I remember that announcement. Like there's no hot water. So I'm like, oh man, this is really rough. You know, this just sucks. And I got to know my friend who lived literally, I was sharing a room here. She lived here on the floor below me. And I had my bed, my roommate had her bed, and we were, you know, I mean, we got along great and it was fun, but it was like, oh, we don't all get our single rooms, you know. My friend lived not only with 3 other beds in the room, but 2 people per bed. And she shared a bed with her mom because her mom had moved, she was from Uzbekistan, and her mom had moved with her when she got accepted to the Moscow Art Theater, a giant honor and an important thing. And the 2 of them worked at night, cleaning offices, for her to go to school during the day, and the mom worked also at another job during the day, and they shared a bed in the dorm because it was such an honor to be going to the school that you did that, you know, and that also that's what you had to do.
Wow. And
my bratty American self was like, okay, there's another wake-up call at how privileged you are and how bratty you are. That like they went down, okay, their kitchen was a hot plate and like roaches running across the wall. And they would go to the shower in the basement with rats. Because I was like, oh, I want to take a shower in your shower. And they were like, no. They told horror stories of the rats that run across the floor. So,
whoa.
And it was like, you know, we're really, really spoiled in this country.
Yeah.
And those kids were 1,000 times better than me. We're not out there like working like crazy,
right,
appreciating the fact that we get to go to this school, which is an amazing school.
Yeah.
You know, we're complaining because we don't have hot water for 2 months. Which in the winter actually is a legitimate complaint. It was cold. It was cold. I probably didn't shower for 2 months. But this is another thing about theater in Russia, which was that you know, graduated from one of these schools, and then you had a theater that like hired you, and then you worked at that theater for life. I went to see a production of Uncle Vanya when I was in Russia, and this is proof that you can have a career for life in the theater, because the most beautiful woman in the world, as she's kind of described, was in her late 60s maybe, and I think the character's 27. I could be wrong.
Nice.
But you know, like all of them, one of my teachers who I absolutely adored was still, I think, playing Stanley Kowalski in his 60s. You know,
wow.
It was like you just got that role and you played it in rep forever. And it's a great gift as an actor. You know, that production of Uncle Vanya was good. I'm sure they were phoning it in by then, but I couldn't tell. Like, it was good to me. And that kind of relationship, I mean, that was so foreign to me, because now it's like, if you're lucky enough to get a play, it's like a couple of weeks and you're done. Right. You know, and you rehearse for a couple of weeks. And I've done a lot of summer stock, which has been wonderful. But 7-day, you know, I guess maybe 9 days rehearsal, whoosh, there you go. It was actually changing. I mean, that was the Soviet system. And actually, my teachers were really funny. They were like, yeah, you know, we didn't like the Soviet system, but boy, was it good for artists. Like, first of all, you were totally funded. Secondly, everybody went because that was like the outlet. It was like, it was life. Like, art and life were this in Soviet Russia. The Soviet regime was very proud of their artists, so that they were really like supportive. But at the same time, you couldn't express yourself, so you would try to find a way in art to do it in like a subtle way, and using like this kind of interesting language that the censors wouldn't get, but that other people would get, and like, what can you get away with? And I'm sure it was very frustrating to the people that were like writing the plays, because they wanted to say other things, but like they were, you know, it was very alive, and people would go to the theater to kind of see what they were going to say and see how they were going to, you know, how far they could go. It's fascinating that that people had this, in a way, it was like the repression created this, and this tension was what people thrived on. I feel like maybe some of that is kind of crucial to something that's great and powerful and speaks to everybody, because it speaks to the people that can't speak. And that was exciting.
Now, did you go from Moscow back to New York, and did you go from Moscow to
Los Angeles? Moscow to New York, and I was there for a while. And we were so like, this is Scott, so pretentious. I hate myself. So, but when I was in Russia, you know, we were so kind of like on fire with this theater thing, and such theater dorks. Anyway, and you put a lot of theater dorks into a room together, and they do this kind of thing, which is like I kind of found myself in two different groups of founding theater companies for like, what are we going to do next? Those of us who went to New York founded this Shakespeare company, basically, because we were like, what can we afford to perform?
Yeah.
And the answer was Shakespeare. But I mean, I loved Shakespeare, but that wasn't really what we did in school.
Yeah.
You know, we did a lot of Chekhov, and I adore Chekhov. And I feel that everybody does it wrong, and I've been to so many productions, and I'm like, no, it's funny, you guys, this is actually a comedy. But I think it takes the Russians and the Russian sensibility to find the humor in that and to make the humor in that. But anyway, so we founded the Shakespeare company, and so for many years, probably 7, I can't remember. But we produced this really, really low budget Shakespeare in New York, and it was very fun. And our first show we rehearsed for 6 months. You know, because it was all my friends, and we didn't pay anybody, and we were just like, hey, come to my place and let's do Shakespeare. And we had a very unconventional rehearsal process that came from the Russian, which was you kind of improv everything. Oh. The way we did it in Russia was very cool. Like, we would get the play, and we would sort of go through it and break it into these beats and kind of name the beats, and then we would improv the play around the events. And so you would have like the event of the first event of Three Sisters. It's Irina's birthday, so there go. Yeah. And we would just kind of explore our characters through improv for the entire play for quite a long time. And then eventually you would start finding, what their inner life was. And the very last thing to come on to that was the line. Cool. And sometimes you'd be like, wait, that can't be the line, because, my inner life was not heading in that direction. But something like Chekhov, you found that it actually did. And you were like, that's genius. When you don't even know what the line is, and all of a sudden it's like the perfect thing to say, because he has built the emotional moments in. And so then we were like, well, that's how we're going to do it with Shakespeare. We're just going to go for it. And it's a little more complicated with those lines and verse and that kind of thing. But it was fun. It was really, really great and really luxurious, actually. Because, of course, then I went into like the actual rehearsal process of America. It doesn't work like that. Like, you got to know your entire thing on the first day. And a movie shoot, it's like, if you don't have all that work done, they're firing you because they don't have the budget and the time for that. We kind of evolved into a more traditional rehearsal schedule. But what our theater company has come to now that we live in LA, most of us, is that we do a Shakespeare play, every Labor Day. And we rehearse for the 3 days prior to that. And then we put the show on, it's actually the day before Labor Day, for one performance.
Wow.
And that's it. So somehow we've gone the opposite from working, because the Russians would work for a year or something on a play. And so we went from working for a long time on a play to working for 3 days on a play. And amazingly, the process is the same. It's just because we've done it so much, it's easier to do now. Like, we don't need a year, which is really fun. And we all kind of, it's like a reunion for us, and it's really fun. And we perform out in a park in upstate New York, and it's just
so cool.
Fun.
What brought you out to Los Angeles? Like, what made you do it?
The honest answer might be really, really lame. I'm trying to remember if it was just because my boyfriend got a job out here, or if there was another impetus. Like, I had always really liked it here. My brother moved here years before I did, and I loved visiting him. And I don't remember the course of the events of like which happened first, like he got the job, or because we were talking about going to LA, he got a job. But I think I used that as an excuse more than going, I'm going to go try to break into film, because that was scary, right? Yeah. So, and I was like way too old to be doing that, and all I had on my resume was a lot of obscure Shakespeare that was like done in the basement, So I was like, I'm not really, this isn't going to be a good move, probably, but it's warm and I like it here, and I should really try to do the film thing. And at the time, I think there were very few shows being shot in New York. Yeah. And so I went out, and my boyfriend at the time had a job, and it was not what I was expecting. Like, I felt really isolated.
Yeah.
I didn't drive, and that's a bad thing, to come here and not drive. Yeah. I basically kind of learned how to drive at LAX with a rental car. You know, like, this isn't right. So I'm still not a great driver.
Okay.
I found it difficult when I first moved here. And I didn't know kind of how to break into film or anything. And I loved acting school, but one of the things that they really didn't teach you was what to do afterwards.
Right.
I mean, they did. They were like, have 6-month-long rehearsal processes and put on Shakespeare plays. Right. And that was great. But then, like, the sort of being in the business wasn't something that I felt like I knew how to handle. And so I ended up moving back to New York after that. And then I think I just wanted to try again. I was, again, not getting up at 6 a.m. and not getting on the line at the Equity Building and going, you know, what am I doing? Like, I need to go where I can actually get a job. And then I came out again, and I actually found more work teaching pretty soon after I moved back out. So then I had my teaching job. And really, it was funny because my plan was to come out to LA to do film and TV, and I came out to LA and I did a lot of theater. It's fun, and I support the LA theater scene. Like, I think there's a lot there, and I would love to see more of an audience there, because I think you really don't know what you're going to get. Yeah. Which is exciting. And sometimes, you know, it's a disaster, but a lot of times, even if the whole thing isn't great, there's something really great about it, and sometimes the whole thing is really magical. Yeah. And it's like nobody's in the audience. And that makes me sad.
You wrote and produced a play called Los Angeles. Can you tell me a little bit about that process?
Well, that was fun and terrifying for me. But I remember at some point, I'd been in a play here, and I had an agent come to the play. And take me on, and I was shocked because I didn't think that really happened. And he was wonderful. I really liked that agent. But then he had said, kind of, you know, quit your day job because it's pilot season. You're going to go out all the time. And I, like an idiot, thought, oh yeah, of course. But you know, when your resume consists of every Shakespeare play in, you know, a basement, it's hard for the casting directors to want to hire you. And so I was at home with no job. Yeah. And I remember watching TV for a while because I was like, I should do research. And then all of a sudden, that was a long time that I was watching TV, and I was like, okay, what's the line between like a complete couch potato who's like been sucked into the TV world and just like chronically unemployed, or like what's research, you know? Yeah. But then I was like, I got to do something. And so while I was waiting for auditions, I started writing kind of scenes for friends of mine to be in. And I had specific friends, like we'd gotten together, and we were actually looking for a play that would like kind of showcase all of us. Yeah. People. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to write one. And I had no idea, you know, I was like, it's going to suck. I'm just going to write this thing. It was just scenes at first. Yeah. And I remember I was so lucky because I was in an acting class with this really great teacher. There would be like vast chunks where people wouldn't bring in stuff. Wow. And I of course, having quit my job, had time to do my scene. So I would like do my scene, and then I'm like, nobody else is going? Okay, well then I was like, well, you know what? I've got these scenes. Can you guys just kind of read them? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And we got like time to kill here. So I started giving the scenes out to the people in the class, and my teacher was like, you got to make a play of this. Like, this isn't just scenes. Like, make this a play. And I'll direct it. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I had to do that then, write a play, which I didn't know how to do. But I really, like, without trying, I think just from spending so much time in the theater, it kind of came out. Yeah. And that was really fun. And through a like complicated series of events, we went through a workshop, and then we kind of changed creative crews. And I remember I was in the workshop, but then somehow all the people that I had written the play for, we were all in the workshop. But then when we sort of got taken on by another producer, we auditioned again against other people, and we didn't get cast. I didn't get cast in my own play. And I was like, what does that tell me? Like, I wrote the role for myself. Like, the idea was that I could play this better than anyone, which is why I wrote it that way. But I couldn't play it better than anyone, because the person who played me was way better than me, like in the actual play. The cool part was seeing it leave me, you know, because I was very invested in the original group, and like, no, these are the people that are going to play it, and this is how it's going to be. And all of a sudden there was a director who I love, who was doing it independently of me. And he was very nice to kind of get my, I wouldn't say get my feedback because he had a very specific vision.
Right.
But, you know, tell me what it needed and also be respectful of me and be very strict with the actors. Like, no, this is the actual line. You have to say it. You know, you can't make it up. Although they were doing some great improv, and I was like, thanks. And the actors were wonderful, and they really contributed to it, and they helped solve a lot of the problems. And I'm just doing the play made me kind of realize that there was still stuff that I hadn't fixed. But like seeing it and watching the audience react to it was a great learning experience for me because I'd never done this and I didn't know what I was doing, and kind of hearing some audiences would react to some things and sometimes I was trying to figure out. I went to the play a lot, and the actors were like, seriously, like, you're here again? Can't you just leave so that we can say the words that we want to say? But I wanted to see like what was the performance and what was the script, and the actors were so good that I had to be there to notice like if they were tweaking it to get the reaction, or if it was something like anyone, like if I needed to tweak it. So it was I was very involved in kind of watching them and trying to see like where, especially coming from an acting perspective, like how much is the actor and how much is the writing. And the truth is, a lot of it is the actor, you know, and they can take a terrible line and sell it. And so it was hard for me to be like, what do I need to fix and what are they just doing really well? And then sometimes like it'd be interesting to see someone have kind of an off night and stuff wouldn't land, and I'd be like, no, that was actually them this time, because they're usually brilliant. But that was very rare with these guys. Like, they were just really good. And so it was a wonderful experience, but also kind of terrifying, because suddenly opening night, I'm having to sit in the audience and watch my play be done, and it was this kind of, I imagine, like, I don't have kids, but you know, you drop your kid off at school and then you're like, oh my God. Yeah. You know, what do I do? Yeah. And how panic stricken you must be, because I was really uncomfortable watching it. I couldn't even enjoy it because I was like, and there were reviewers and stuff, and I was like, if they give me a bad review, I'm never getting out of bed and that kind of thing. I was like, just really, I remember they called me up on stage at the end and my legs were shaking, and I was wearing a short dress, so everyone could see the shaking legs, and I'm going, this is so humiliating.
Now you're right now though working on a web series, or you're in a web series. Like, how did you make that jump?
That was really fun. That was something we kind of wanted to do something. My friends and I, who were in my various theater companies, we really wanted to do something that was like that we could kind of afford to do, that would be accessible, and that I love web series. Yeah. I love the fact that you can like actually make something and put it up there and people can see it. Yeah. You know, how empowering is that? Right, right. And so we had this idea, and originally I think it was supposed to be a TV show, but at some point we were like, you know what, we can kind of shoot this and we can do this. So we, the hard part was editing it down. I remember we wrote this whole pilot and we had to edit it down to 5 minutes. And I had a very hard time kind of letting go of stuff. And I think, you know, now, like, I think it's a muscle. Like, the more you write 5-minute long things, the more you kind of get used to being able to do that. But for us, that was a real challenge. And so we kind of got it down, and it's a really fun idea. It wasn't my idea. I really enjoyed it. A humorous take on sort of the self-help groups that I've found around LA that I've never seen anywhere else. That's kind of like, okay, we're going to handle this aspect of our lives, so we're all going to meet once a week and like read this book together and like apply it to our lives. I have never encountered this before, but I haven't actually been a part of it because I'm not the type of person that anybody wants in one of these groups. But all my friends seem to be in these groups, right? So they're all like getting goals done and, you know, these goal group things. And I can't get anything done. So like someone asked me, they're like, why aren't you in the goal group? And I was like, what's a goal? You know, so like it's not, you know, it's not a good fit. But it was really intriguing to me to see, like, what if people kind of did this, but they applied all the lessons badly, and just like really messed up their lives. And that's kind of what our, you know, our heroines, the 30 people who are like meeting together to work through this fake book, which we're writing, which is very fun, this fake self-help book, kind of take the lessons, but they always end up like not helping. And we had a really great crew kind of come in and do the pilot, and so now I guess we just sort of have to do more episodes, which is you know, I was like, we just have to write a pilot. Then somebody else will do the rest. It doesn't work. Maybe it works that way, but it hasn't worked that way. I don't know what that way is, where that happens.
Overall, your years here in Los Angeles, like what are some of the lessons that you've learned about this place and learned about this business?
LA was a real mystery to me. The first time I came in, and the second time I still didn't know. And I think partly writing my play was because it takes place in LA, and it was a bunch of sort of young people figuring out what they were doing here, like everything is. I was really sort of trying to address that through the play, because I think when you've been somewhere for a long time, like you can't really see it.
Right.
So like I can't write about New York, for example.
Right.
It was too present for me when I was there. I came here and everything was new enough that I had a perspective, and I felt like I didn't get anything, so that was fascinating, because I had to try to figure out what this place was. Like, it felt so temporary, and everything was, you know, seemed sort of instantaneous and I guess spontaneous. Like, all of a sudden there, you know, it's like a city of strip malls that, you know, it's not a city, you know. It was really interesting to me, and everybody seemed to be living these kind of disconnected, really isolated existences, and that were somehow maybe connected to the film industry, or maybe not. But the whole kind of world of being an actor was a mystery to me too. Like, there's a whole thing of I'm an actor that you can say, you know, that can be your identity. But it doesn't have to mean anything. You know, there's also this feeling of like you had to have a TV show to prove to really be an actor, or you know, you had to be in some project. There was a kind of a frustration here that was underlying a kind of a laid back attitude. Yeah, and that was really interesting, because again, it's like Soviet Russia. This is what I want to be doing. This is what I am doing, and you know, they're not the same. And so there's this really interesting energy of like aspiration, and on the one hand it's incredibly energetic, but on the other hand it's frustrating, and so it's kind of like I'm gonna pretend like it doesn't matter to me. You know, I don't even know how to answer this question, because I haven't figured it out. You know, and I could write 12 novels and not figure it out. The striving that's so apparent in New York is just hidden here. It's underneath the surface. There's so many people and such little work that it's really I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it's a very strange place to live. And I actually was talking to some friends who were visiting just over the weekend, and they were like, you know, we have LA has such a bad reputation of being just like this really phony place, where everybody just wants something from everybody else, and they'll pretend to be your friend, but then they'll, you know, steal your ideas or whatever, and meanwhile everybody's like, you know, really skinny and you know, like plastic surgery, and they were like, where is that? We're like, because that's what we were kind of hoping to encounter. We don't see it. Like, we see a lot of like really real people who are like, you know, invested in what they're doing, and like not out to, you know, climb their way to the top in Hollywood. They were like where do you find those people? And I was like, you know, I should know the answer to that, because this is supposedly my industry, but I haven't met them either. You know, I just know a lot of people who are really talented and just like doing their thing, or like trying to do their thing, you know? Moving
from Los Angeles and all the craziness that goes on here, you've gone out to like Africa and worked in orphanages. Like, can you tell me about like your...
Well, that really came out of my brother and sister-in-law's decision to adopt. And they have 7 wonderful kids from all over the world, and so I was very lucky when I was when my brother was adopting his first child from Ethiopia, my brother and sister-in-law. I was lucky enough to get to go with my sister-in-law to Ethiopia. It was really wonderful, but it was also, you know, I realized what kind of a need there was, and how the kids who were in the orphanage, you know, my thought was, oh, these poor kids, they're in an orphanage. That's terrible. But they got the most wonderful care. They were so loved. I mean, when we showed up, this was amazing. We showed up, and all the babies in their little were like lying out in their little blankets, like their little swaddling, like in the sun. And downstairs where the older kids were, there was like hysterical laughter for a really long time. And I was like, is there a comedy show going on down there? And they were like, no, it's our laughing therapy CD that we play, and then the kids all start laughing, and like we do it several times a day. It's just like a laugh break. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant, a laughing break. I was like, this is so enlightened, like this is the best place to be. And like, and the kids were just so adored by the staff. And then I went out to the street.
Yeah.
And there were all these homeless kids.
Yeah.
I imagine, because I know the statistics for HIV in Ethiopia, probably a lot of them were HIV positive, you know, kind of begging on the streets. And that was really disturbing and upsetting. And one of the orphanages was for kids with HIV. And when we were traveling to the one where my niece was, which was not an HIV orphanage, they said, listen, can each of you bring an extra suitcase for A-Hope? That's what it was called. Okay. They were like, because there's this HIV orphanage and they don't have any money or any supplies. So just, can you bring what you're going to bring? Because the parents will bring supplies for the other orphans when they come. And can you just bring some, like, diapers? Like, we don't have diapers, you know? So we filled a suitcase and we went to drop our suitcase off at this other orphanage. And this was supposed to be kind of like just a little day trip. But I was really, well, both of us were very taken with the HIV positive kids and the orphanage and the incredible, they had no money, but they were doing their best to care for these kids. And like the older kids were helping the younger kids in their kindergarten class. And it was really, you know, the person who gave us the tour was the bookkeeper, but he like knew all the kids and they loved him, and he'd walk in the room and get like a group hug, and he was just wonderful. And I was like, this is really amazing. And, you know, how are you guys kind of getting by? And they said that the Clinton Foundation was basically the reason that they could exist, because Clinton has this wonderful foundation in Africa that's fighting HIV. And basically his foundation has allowed for that orphanage to have free antiretroviral drugs, which are prohibitively expensive. And so because of that, if you get into the orphanage, you'll be, you know, you'll live, basically. And if you don't, if you're out on the streets of Addis, you know, you're not going to make it. And so it was really gut-wrenching to kind of be out on the street again with all these kids, and you're like, oh my God, you know, how are they going to live? So it was really kind of upsetting, like, you know, what do we do to help? You know, like there's got to be a way. And what I basically started doing was just kind of trying to raise money for the orphanage, because I didn't know what to do for, you know, the kids once I was gone. But we had this connection now to this orphanage, and we became very involved in sort of trying to help the orphanage. They do have people adopting from this orphanage, A-Hope, but it's very difficult. It was very difficult to adopt an HIV positive child as an American. Yeah. One of the things Obama did was sign legislation to lift the, I don't even know what it's called, but there was a kind of a very difficult paperwork process and a waiting period and all this stuff. And Obama, well, I guess when I said, this is great, Obama did it, my brother was like, actually Bush, we like did all the work to line it up. So you can thank Bush for something, right? Like, hey, he made it easier to adopt HIV positive kids. Excellent, that's a good thing. But for the most part, it's sort of like, you know, there's not a big demand for HIV positive kids, unfortunately. So I think the expectation is, you know, we're gonna be the parents to these kids, and then, you know, when they're old enough, they're gonna be on their own. I came away with a feeling of like, oh my God, the kids in the orphanages are the lucky kids, because you can be out there, you know, lose your parents to HIV, which a lot of kids do, and be on the street and maybe have it yourself. You know, and think that all that can happen to you, and that you can still have a full, loving and loved life, you know, which is what my niece has now, is really wonderful.
When you think about the course of your life, from beginning to end, because you've had so many rich, beautiful experiences, what would you say your greatest accomplishment is?
Whoa. It's accomplishment may not be the right word for what I'm about to describe, but I think what I have learned sort of from everything or beyond everything. I sort of have grown to realize that there's kind of an inner voice, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say wisdom, but quite often it's not really wise. But kind of an inner voice that we have, that I have. And I pushed it away for a long time. And I think if you just sort of listen to it, something comes out. Maybe it's a play, maybe it's a novel, maybe it's a role.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a decision. But to actually honor it and believe in it, as opposed to going, you know, no, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to, I'm going to judge that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times I've been trying to push myself in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Against, you know, my sense of self or whatever, which is saying something else.
Yeah.
And I push it and I push it and I push it, and then, you know, that it never works out.
Yeah.
So if I can sort of try to honor the part of me that knows better instead of ignoring it, that will be an accomplishment. And I think it has happened.
Yeah.
Where I've just sort of trusted that.
Yeah.
And I've always been really, really happy with the result.
Are there any things in your life, if you could go back in time, that you would change?
I don't think so. I don't think regrets really have any place, unless they, you know, you go, I've always wanted to learn French, okay, I'm going to do it, you know? But I think the kind of regret of like, I should have done this and I didn't, and so everything's off, isn't helpful. I could have gotten more out of college if I had spent time working and maybe traveling and, you know, becoming focused. But if I had, I would be on a different path. You know, I wouldn't have discovered acting, because I discovered acting because I felt lost. I mean, I'd always loved it, but I discovered it as like, I need it in order to feel a part of something, or I needed to answer something inside myself.
Yeah.
And I think if I had been doing something, if I had been focused, I wouldn't have needed, again, to listen to that, that voice that said, this is what you want. It's not at all what you think you should be doing.
Right.
And it's probably a terrible idea, but this is what you want, so go for it. And I think, you know, whatever sort of mistakes we make always sort of take us to the right place. Right. So no, that's a long way of saying no.
If you had a kid in front of you who said that I want to go off and become a producer or a writer or an actor, what sort of advice do you have?
Just to do it, you know, no matter how much you hear them say no. I mean, I had the coolest story happen to actually my friend, but I was there, so I can tell this story, because it would be great if it happened to me, but it totally didn't happen to me. But I went with a friend of mine to see Death of a Salesman on Broadway. And it was Brian Dennehy, and he was fantastic. But the woman playing Mrs. Lohman, she came out afterwards. We were just sort of, we like to go to plays together and like sort of, you know, dork out as actors, like about, you know, the people coming out. Right. So she came out, and she saw my friend immediately, and she goes, "You're an actor, aren't you?" And she goes, "Yes." And she said, "Never give up, no matter how many times they tell you no. Never give up." She's like, "Look at me. You know, I've been doing this for 50 years. She's like, and I think I don't know if she won a Tony Award, I'm sure she was nominated, but she was fantastic and on Broadway and brilliant. And, you know, that's, to me, that's making it. She made it. She did it, you know? And she said, I mean, clearly for her whole life, for 50 years, they'd been saying no to her, and she kept at it. And that, she was giving my friend a gift of, like, do this thing. Yeah. You know, I don't know if she saw something in her that reminded, my friend, that reminded her of her. But, you know, she was like, here, do it. Yeah. And if I could pass that lesson on, and I mean, you know, there's a lot of obstacles to that. There's a lot of, you know, we've talked about how difficult the life is, you know, and sometimes you're just like, this is exhausting, you know, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm tired and I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just like working really hard for no result that I can see. There's obviously a result, but, you know, where? But you know, as long as that voice in you is saying, this is what you want,
Right.
do it. I think you can try to ignore that voice, like I do often, but it's there, and it's going to make itself heard.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, just like drop the drama and just like listen, then, you know, you'll be a success no matter what, because you'll be doing what you love.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for coming in to
Thank
speak
you.
with me.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you all so much for joining us on the Cake Cast. Come back next week. I'll be interviewing Joshua Zahner, the creator of Kuza for Cirque du Soleil. Thank you again so much, Caroline, for coming in.
Thank you.